Hello, ladies and entree.
Hi.
Today we are Adventuresome Reviews, reviewing the combat codes by
Alexander Darwin, I do believe is his name. Yes!
a surprisingly suitable name for the contents of the book.
Though, I had to ask for him to recall the name so I could find the synopsis and yada yada yada. So that's the...
This sounds like an assault on my character.
Yes, it is. So that's the description he gave me of it, seeing as he couldn't remember the full name. So my mind went to, wait, is he called Alexander Ali or something? Which would have been far more appropriate. But in this case, wrong, unfortunately. Yes.
This assault upon my character has left me scarred and deformed for life.
I will pay your bills, your mental bills.
You missed the reference.
I did?
Yes.
Well, I feel most ashamed for that fact, and I exhort you to explain it to me, because I'm still unutterably
The
lost.
third Star Wars movie after Sidious claims power in the Senate.
Oh, that is such a non sequitur. I think I'm using that wrong, but still, those are like the two narratives are completely unrelated.
I use scarred and deformed. I don't even know if that's correct, but I use scarred and deformed. That's
So
what
you
he
tried to
says
quote a
after the Jedi
movie?
kill him.
So you tried to quote a movie without even quoting it accurately.
Shh. You're already assaulting my character. We don't need to add more fuel to that fire.
There's a lot of fuel, so yes, we should probably not.
We need to save it for a dark winter.
Okay.
After nuclear winter hits and we're curled up in our bunkers with our teddy bears and our salt, then you can start burning that fire.
Well, I guess I'll start stockpiling fuel then. On to the synopsis. We fight till the rest shall not have to. In a world where single combat determines the fate of nations, the Grivar fight so that the rest can remain at peace. Sego is a mysterious Grivar boy forced to fight his way out of the slave circles into the world's most prestigious combat school. At the Lyceum, Sego will learn a variety of martial arts from eclectic teachers, develop deep bonds of friendship, and fight against contentious rivals to climb the school's rankings. But Sego will find more than combat studies at the Lyceum. He will find the mysterious of its past unraveled by forces greater than he could ever imagine.
So,
Much mysteries.
one of the great parts about this book, it's a very action, martial arts heavy book, and the author does a great job of describing it.
The author really knows his stuff.
At least pretends to. He's really good at either knowing it or faking it, and regardless, the result
Both
is
of which
the same.
work perfectly fine because we have no idea what's going on, so
I know a little bit of what's going on.
I was talking we as in the general sense of the readers. From personal experience being a reader, we know absolutely nothing. We just sort of glide around, oh, I suppose this is true. I'm pretty sure there's a fact I read in a fantasy book somewhere that I believe is actually real, which is probably not the best way to go through life, but there you have it.
Okay, there you have it. Anyway, so the action in the book is rock solid, both well written and well described, and so it feels like the people actually know what they're doing instead of
And
just...
despite its prevalence, it never slows the story down. I am never bored. Oh, let's skip past this combat scene, because they never take ungodly long.
The author does a good job of providing stakes for the combat scenes, but also varying what each combat requires. So it's not just character performs the same style of combat, even though they're all martial arts in their own ways. The individual fights feel distinctive and different enough that they maintain interest despite them being...
And a lot of the time, it's not simply, oh, parry, block, counter, fight. There's another layer to the combat that makes it dramatically more interesting, as in, Sego, the main character, there's influences going on in the circles, which we'll get into more a little bit later, and this really helps add just interest to each individual fight scene, because once again, it changes from fight to fight.
Yeah.
The whole combat circles, once again, we're getting good action that we can get right now. So,
Good world building.
yes. And so, okay, let's preface this with a little bit of explanation of the world. You may or may not understand it based on the synopsis, but basically, there was this grand old Petrie in the olden days of your...
Petrie?
Yes, it's the abbreviated version of peace treaty. I'm making time, but you are currently wasting with your issues. So anyway, there was a peace treaty in the olden days of yore, where all the nations decided that, hey, we're just over that war things. We're just gonna send 2 gladiators to fight over contended regions, and whoever wins the gladiator bout gets the region. And it's actually really interesting because...
And it's not just regions, it's any political or even personal dispute can be contracted for the Grivar, which are these fighters, and they're bred to fight. They've evolved differently from standard humans to heal faster, have stronger bones, all that through generations of breeding and training. And so any dispute can be resolved by a Grivar fight.
And what's more is, these disputes are actually fairly heavy things, because at some point, it's like, winning a dispute is hundreds of thousands of jobs for the nation you've contracted. So this is a fairly major event, and these plots of terrain with all the jobs and mines and whatnot, they only come up for a dispute like every 5 years or something.
It probably depends upon the dispute in question. They might negotiate treaties.
Regardless,
and stuff.
It vacillates and yada yada yada. And so, there's these special circles and arenas in which these gladiatorial bouts take place, and this is low-key one of my favorite parts of the book, but not in a, oh my god, this is awesome, it's just a really unique way. And I'm going to describe them as metal kind of dome cages, made of, I really don't know.
They're just rings. They're just fighting rings.
Okay, they're just rings upon the ground, right? And they're made of different metals, and the metals come in various different colors, and what these metals do is they influence the psyches of the combatants within them. So you have this special metal, I think it's red, and it makes you overconfident and creative, right? And so what one of Sago's first interactions with this is that he's in a kind of he's struggling with an opponent, and this circle that causes him to be creative and audacious fools him into making a very bad mistake, and thus losing the bout. But this is the only type of circle there are. There are circles of all kinds and styles. Circles that the circle makers don't even really understand how they affect the combatants. It really helps.
Goes back to the world building being good. The world building is both pervading throughout the story. It's most of the world, or huge swaths of the world, live under the ground. Mm-hmm. But there's also large parts that live above ground, and there is some hierarchy to that, but it's not super hard. And so you have the fighters that they fight for disputes, and then you have huge storms on the surface, and none of what transpires in the book is something you could realistically find in most other books. It is, from start to finish, a unique experience of reading, which is really enjoyable.
And what's even better is that it's handled most deftly, as I was never bored, or, hey, here's a paragraph of exposition explaining this away. No, you were introduced to it very nicely and organically.
Yeah.
So, it's a well-built world that does not bore you with the building process.
You experience the world by interacting and traveling through it rather than being told about it, which is, again, just great.
Yes, the far superior way to go about such things.
Yeah. Despite all this praise, though, and while I say this, the characters were solid, the plot itself didn't particularly interest me immensely.
The plot is split into follows 2 main characters. You have Sego, who is this, 11-year-old prodigy drawn up from the depths and dregs of society, right? And for him, I actually really liked his story, because he has this, your first introduction to him, or maybe it's not your first introduction to him, but you're granted this memory of his past, and it's this idyllic island paradise of blue skies, yellow sand, and, peace and a tightly knit family of like 4 or 5 people, what have you. And then you transpose that, the blue sky, sunny Hawaii beach into this dark underground sludge fest of a world, and one that's a really nice contrast. And then when he finally, you explain away by, of course, he's just underground, right? It's underground now. But then he eventually goes up to the surface, and the surface world is a cloudy disaster. Not disaster, sorry, just a cloudy storm. It's like, oh, now I'm curious where he's come from.
The author does do a good job of both seeding and introducing you to the mystery of where Seigo comes from, but he draws it out a little bit too long for me. Because you get to a point and you understand where Seigo's from and what's actually going on with him.
Yeah.
Several chapters before the author...
that is where the main difficulty with the plot comes in, because the second character, the older, grizzled Grivar who finds Seigo and kind of says, I'm going to submit you for candidacy at the Lyceum, right? His entire story is finding out where Seigo is from. Problem is, you as the readers know exactly where Seigo is from halfway through the story. And so, that point on, anytime you look at this Grivar who is supposed to find this out, he's like, I am so bored, there's no mystery here. How can you not see this is what's happening? Right? And it's just really slows down the story. However, Seigo's part of that, Seigo's time at the Lyceum, is once again handled, to me, fairly to really well.
Yeah.
Really strong stakes.
Yeah.
Because he brings, as a friend who is kidnapped, not quite kidnapped,
just real strong stakes is enough, and it goes back to the author properly setting up conflict and stakes for all the various bouts that matter to the readers, because the readers want Seigo to win these fights, and they're not easy fights by any means. And again, he has to use different methods and make different sacrifices.
Yeah, it's like he went from being a prodigy down in the dirt and grime of the underworld to being one of many prodigies, which really helps because he's still slightly different from everybody around him, but he is not, second coming of the great ancient war hero, what have you. Not that there is one in this book. There is a bevy of characters, and the book does better than many with introducing them and having them personalities, but by and large, you only care about 2 or 3 of them, unfortunately.
It has good, well-designed characters, rather. None of the characters, to me, felt cardboard or like they were just there to fill a plot role. Like,
okay, I would agree with you.
They felt developed in their own way. While we don't really get to interact or explore them a whole lot, it still felt like there was personality there for almost all of them.
And I was rarely thoroughly engaged in what character interactions we did have. They weren't cardboard cutout character interactions, but they weren't exactly stellar. They're kind of... The interactions are a line drawn between great and copy and pasted.
It never really struck me as copy and pasted.
That's why I said they're not. They're kind of a line drawn between them. Kind of right down the middle.
Okay, we'll have to work on that later.
Yes, we will. I'm sure our glorious viewers and listeners have a completely sublime idea of what I'm talking about.
Preposterous. Preposterous.
You're simply depressed that you lack my elocutive skills.
We're fluffing.
Totally.
So, do you have anything else to say?
There's like 2 villain-ish characters in the story, and you have Seigo's rival, who is actually really well done. I do not like... I distaste this character to the most deepest part of my body. Not quite. But at the same time, it's one
Down
of those...
to your toes is what
Yes. Down to my toes. My toes shiver with
or
fear.
your longest hair,
Yeah, sure, why not? Whatever.
depending on your orientation.
Let me speak! And so, this character is somebody I dislike, but at the same time, he is a suitable rival to Sego, not because he's operating on the same power level or competence level, but ideologically they are completely different, and it's actually really nice. The character kind of vacillates between... I'm not entirely sure how you're competent enough to be here at the Lyceum, but he is, because he is from a bloodline of noble Grievar, and he has a lot of knowledge, and, so I like him, but then there's another, the kind of distant villain who is, I do what I must because it is right for my people. And he is this leader, kind of, slash pseudo-villain. I don't actually know if I can call him a villain, but regardless, we're going to call him a villain because I am doing things that I don't really know.
Yeah. Antagonist.
Antagonist, and he's a little bit weaker.
I don't think he's weaker from the concept of an antagonist, because he's not really antagonist. He is a character, and character is important in how he works and fits into the story, makes sense, and is well designed. It's just he's not really a protagonist or an aggressive antagonist.
Okay, so he's not an antagonist, but he is the leader of the nation that Sego comes from, and he is part of he is okaying an ideology shift, slowly giving up the old ways to bring in the new, right? And the story makes a great deal of kicks up a great deal of dust about how this is the bad thing. I struggle with seeing how this is... all these new methods are actively detrimental. And so obviously, the book is called The Combat Codes, and these are rules by which the Grievar are supposed to go through life, and how it teaches them to fight, and wisdoms, right? And so you have this second villain, this leader of the nation, and he is slowly getting rid of the combat codes and this ancient tradition of Grievar, that basically the entire foundation of the peace treaty that is stopping wars. And I just struggle with seeing the book. I don't care about the death of these old ways, right? I can see how some of them are useful.
The author wants you to care about them more than he gives you reason to.
Right.
The combat codes.
And even kind of the great evil that's mysteriously happening throughout the book. It's not exactly evil, just all the add-ons to this great evil is what makes it evil. It's making a sandwich with a bunch of evil poisons in it. The poisons are necessary, and it makes the sandwich evil, not because the sandwich is evil, but because of the poisons.
I pretty much stated everything I wanted to, so I'm just going to sit here and nod till you run out of breath.
I can talk up a storm. Years of palaver. That's me.
Do you have anything to say, though?
No, duh.
Then what would you rate the book?
3.5 stars.
I would have given it 4, because while there were distinctly points where I wasn't all afire to keep reading, the prose, the construction, all of it was very technically good.
Okay, yeah. My main problem with the story is that I couldn't get behind the death of tradition, and I was frequently just bored with the second main character's plot. Even when he wasn't dealing with the mystery of Sego's past. So
I would have given it 4 stars, 3.5, so somewhere between 1 and 5 stars.
Or 1 in 100 stars, depending on how exact you want to be.
That's a dangerous road. We're going to go to the milledecimals eventually.
But then we could actually be accurate in our cutting
repartee.
I was going to say eviscerations of the books and whatnot, but okay. Because Our repartee
Or
is
are we going to get down to, like, how big the words are on the page?
I could do that! Or, paragraph size and sentence length. There's, endless depths we could criticize books with.
We're going to measure the indentation and the typesetting of
how
all
they
the
spell the
books.
main character's name with a C instead of an S. We could be absolutely vicious to all books.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yes, but it would allow us to pad this rather than just padding it like this.
Okay, so toodaloos, goodbyes. Ignore my brother and his palavering because he is useless.
Yes, and probably just skip over all of our make space. Goodbye, fare thee well.